I'ma help the people close to me. They help the people close to them and then.
Welcome back to another episode of Unguarded. We here with another OG in the building, Antonio Williams, doing us the pleasure to come and chop it up with me. Antonio, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I appreciate being a part of this because, again, as we know, knowledge is power. We got to spread this information so people are going about this the right way.
Definitely. And we already know you have a lot of it. You've been in this game for a number of decades, doing it from marketing, recruiting, from doing things in the media side, doing things with the NBA, even you with baseball as well in the baseball sector. I
Yes,
mean, so
awesome.
yeah, you were everywhere, and of course a number of other things that I'm not touching on, but we'll get into it. But the first thing I want, as I always love to just hear, especially as I'm going through my transition actively while building, but always want to start the calls off when we talk to the vets that have kind of officially transitioned. Was like, what was that moment like for you? Like now you're obviously in the corporate side, the really heavy on the business side of the game. Can you just touch upon that moment when you had to shift and transition before you really got totally into the corporate business side of the sport industry?
It's funny. One of the things that I always wanted to do was stay close to the game as I was making that transition. And it's part of the reason why we're having this conversation because a lot of those avenues that when you're making the transition, as it relates to knowing what's available to you, a lot of those things aren't readily available to you in terms of getting the information as to what is this job function like. It's part of the game, but what is it like? What is that job function like? I mean, I think we all know, the coaching when you transition from playing to coaching, we know that, but just how do you become a scout? What if you want to work in marketing in terms of going and signing players for various companies and all those things? So just having access to all the different careers that you can explore and still be a part of the game if that's your choice, I think is something that's really, we need to do a better job of getting that information out. And I didn't know that. So I was a lot of bumping my head, contacting people and like, hey, what do you do? And do I want to do that? I don't know if I want to do that. It was a lot of that. And then taking positions and getting in there midstream and figuring out, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. So those are all things that I was open to and that really helped my transition. But it's nothing like playing though.
Yeah. No. I
Nothing
mean,
like it.
what was it like emotionally? So I think obviously many of us had the great fortune to play at that time in college. Most likely you played in college, got a degree. So we usually walk away with a degree,
Right,
unlike some of our European, teammates that we've been able to kind of come across in the journey. But
right.
what was it like emotionally figuring that out? Obviously, staying in the sport space gives you a little bit leverage because at least you've been in there, you've been networking because you've been playing and being in the space. But what was it like emotionally, still trying to figure that out, but not being sure, and time is ticking. You still have things to take care of, life to live. So
Right, right.
how did you approach that emotion of it's done, I have to figure out what I'm gonna do, and it's uncomfortable?
Emotionally, it was tough. It was tough. Even with me going and working, once I finished playing, going and working in NBA, after I finished playing, it was tough because, again, as I said, it's nothing like playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally had to go and talk to someone, and I'm not embarrassed to say that because I was struggling with that transition because it's not just that time that you played when you were in college or that time when you were playing professionally. It's not just that. It's for the overwhelming majority of us, it's this is a sport that I've been playing at an organized level for almost my entire life. And so it's not just those 4 years when you're in college, or that whatever that amount of time that you played when you were playing professionally, whether that was a year, 2 years, 3 years, or 10. It's taken into the equation, the fact that you've been doing this and doing it in an organized setting your entire life. And
Right.
you know this, like, once you, even if you go and you play with other people that played in college or play professionally, and you do it in a setting where we just meet up a couple times a week and we play, it's not like playing when you're playing in front of fans.
Mm-hmm.
Because that my vice was going into an opposing arenas, making a big play, and making everybody be quiet.
Yeah.
Like, that was my vice.
Yeah.
It is nothing like, you know what it's like when you pan the crowd. You're not looking at one person in particular, but you just look because you just took the air out of the entire room.
Right. Yeah.
It's nothing like it. It is
Nothing. Yeah, it's
nothing like it,
powerful.
right? It is absolutely nothing like that. And I'm a big, I like other sports, and I'm a big MMA fan. And Israel Adesanya just said this. He's one of my favorite fighters, and he had lost the title against a guy that was like his arch nemesis, and they fought in other areas of combat sports, and he lost against him, and he finally beat him. And he said, "I wish that everybody in the world gets an opportunity to feel what I feel just for 10 seconds, if you can feel that."
Mm-hmm.
And it's absolutely nothing like it. And so when that isn't, and I'm saying that because once you play, even when you play with people that played in college or play professionally, and you guys meet up a couple times a week and just play at the gym, it ain't like that.
Yeah.
Right? It is not
Right.
like that. And
Yeah.
so you really have to find what it is that, not re it's not recreating that, but it's taking that energy and that passion and that conviction that you have in your soul, and channeling it in other directions. And I think the other thing that helped me emotionally too is, I spent a lot of time, and you know this, when you're making that transition, um, and you're going to embark on this journey, because we all do,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when you make that transition, you spend so much time trying to separate yourself from your former life. Ah, that's not me anymore. That's not me anymore.
Right.
It's wasted energy. It's an exercise in futility, because that's always going to be a part of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the energy and the drive that's driving you to do something else, and do something else, and do, as you know, the young folks like to say, it's the energy and the drive that's going to cause you to do your big one
Yeah.
next, right?
Yeah. For
And so
sure.
you can't spend so much energy trying to separate yourself from that. It's taking it and moving it toward whatever it is that you're passionate about, whether that's staying a part of the game or doing something outside of the sport if you want to pursue something else.
Yep.
Um, so that's what I would say. Like, really don't separate it, because it's what makes you great. And because again, I can say, from working in this game from a scouting perspective and all the different areas that I worked in, um, the odds of working in it from a scouting perspective are probably more steep than trying to be a player.
Mm-hmm.
Because I say that because now, when you're in it from a management and scouting perspective, you are competing against people that, quite frankly, maybe they don't have the talents that you and I have to go and be able to play. So that pool is a whole lot larger,
Yeah.
right? So that conviction and that belief in oneself that you had, that you channel to pursue being able to play, which is winning the lottery. If you want to do this in a management perspective, you have to take those same energies, those same convictions, and channel it toward that. That's why I say, a lot of people will tell you that's your former life. You should separate yourself from that. That's not all the way true.
Yeah, yeah, it's not black and white. You definitely have to hold on to some of that and not give it
Right.
all away. Before we jump, because I definitely want to get into just really everything you've learned along the journey. I think one of the key things, at We Evolve, we're getting ready to launch our contract review tool, and we have places on our application where we want everybody to come back, give information, give insights, start to learn and track the stats of everyone else around us.
Right.
I've talked to a couple of, I think, obviously we know men and women are much different. So men and women basketball players or athletes in general, how they cope with, as I say, the traumas of being an elite athlete are different. And I found a lot of the men are still, since they've transitioned, still dealing with the traumas. It's like the showing up to teams, making an agreement, and then they don't do their side, and that's trauma. An agent doing you dirty or getting just selling you and not really paying attention to you, as I say, that's trauma. We look at
Yes.
it as it's just a part of this business that we do, but what I've identified is that we all probably have to heal from, especially if you've done overseas a long time, every year some type of trauma that you then went through because
Right.
somebody false promises or someone lying or someone that's supposed to have your best interest just ghosting you, and now you're on your own. That's so traumatic. And so I wanted to just touch upon, are there any stories from your time, one that you would agree that, yeah, this, now when you look back at it, was not okay, and then of course one story just around, again, understanding the power of having another opinion around your contracts, around your negotiations, and having the info to make the best deal. Obviously you're still in this world, you probably see it, but just wanted to revert to some real life stories you might have around those similar types of concepts.
I think it's really important because, again, what we're doing, part of the reason why we're doing something, what makes what we do, especially when you're a player, so unique, is that I know a lot of people say this, but we are really doing something that you're supposed to be paid to do and supposed to be paid at market value, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let's say it that way. But you're doing something that really you would do for free and that you were doing for free before you got decided that you wanted to embark on the journey of, hey, I want to be a professional basketball player, or I want to play in college and leverage my talent to play in college. It's essentially something that you would do for free, that you do as, I do this, this is part of my pastime. And again, and I say that because that may be different than a lot of other professions. It's different than a lot of other occupations where, people are, they perform a job and they're like, yeah, but in my spare time, I'm not looking at the books of another company and let me see, like, if you're an accountant, right? In your
Mm-hmm.
spare time, you may go play basketball, right? That's what you like to do. We're doing something that we would do for free
Mm-hmm.
and that we have done for free. And when you are in this world, there are people that know that you would do this for free and they will look to leverage the fact that you would do it for free. And so making certain that you're, just because you will do it for free doesn't mean that you should do it for free. And making certain that you don't go for the "we'll be greater later" or "I'll take care of you later," and after you agree to your contract was structured a certain way and you get there and it's like, well, we don't have it now, we'll get you later, we'll double up, and all those different things, and you like, okay, I'll do it, because you're not, as much as you're getting paid to play basketball, you're thinking of it from a standpoint of, this is something that I would do for free if I were at home, and I'm seeing the world. So okay, I can wait until they take care of me. And the more that you allow yourself to be in that situation, because basketball is one of your passion projects, let me say it that way, the more that you allow yourself to be in that situation, the more that people will look at you as you're a mark to be taken advantage of. And that's as
Hmm.
real as I can put it.
Right.
And, and that happens not only as a player and there's trauma that you deal with in that standpoint, that also happens when you go and work for teams. Because again, going back to what I was saying with you are the pool is so vast of people that are willing to do what it is that you do that you can really undervalue and undersell your experiences and the value that you bring to the table just so you can have a seat at the table. And sometimes having that seat at the table actually puts you on the menu because you're so willing to undervalue what you bring. And you have to, and so you don't have that trauma of being eaten at the table.
Right.
You gotta stand on business,
Right.
right? And this is what I bring, this is what we agreed to, and this is what I expect. And so that has happened to me as a player. It's happened to me, when you enter into the workspace, things that and you end up giving game for free, and your information is now taken, and they leverage it and make million-dollar decisions, multi-million-dollar decisions off of information that you've given, and it doesn't equate to you getting a financial payoff, a position, whatever it is. So you really have to be careful when you're out here and you're playing, and even when you're working in this as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big one. I think one of my Horace Warmly definitely in long time ago, he told me when we were starting just trying to figure out the direction for Weave Off before any tech or anything, he was just like, look, people will take as many calls as possible because most likely what's coming out of your mouth is something they don't know. And
Absolutely.
it's insights for them. And so I'd love for you to just touch upon that a little more around, I think I've tried my best to say it sometimes, an agent will say, hey, can you give me this person number? Like, do you know the player here? Can you call me? And, hey, that might, for some people, it might lead to millions made. For some, it might lead to, 100K or more made over the span of that player's career if you were the one that made that connection.
Right.
How do you how do you balance between, look, I need to be compensated for my network and for my information that I'm giving you, and balance between it's a networking thing. Obviously, you have to give to receive. How do
Yeah.
you balance the two between, look, I know that person's going to give, I need them, their information, and I'm giving information. How do you balance between, look, no, this needs to be paid for, and the other thing is about networking and the dynamics of obviously networking and sharing information?
So that's happened for me over time, and I know the things that I silo them. These are things that I could, for lack of a better term, these are the game for free things that are unique to my experience and unique to my knowledge, but it's also in the you can also phrase it as the general knowledge bucket, right? Where if and of course my general knowledge may be different than your general knowledge, and or not the general knowledge is different. My interpretation is going to be different than yours. And so but it nonetheless goes into that sort of general knowledge bucket. Then I have another bucket where it's okay, I have assessed the times where I've given that game for free and people have taken it and made six-figure to seven-figure decisions off of it. And now I know, all right, this is the nuanced information that is really specific to me, and the insight you that if you get it from me, you're able to really leverage that and make some real decisions. Even when I'm interviewing, sometimes for some high-level positions, I sometimes resist when they ask me to do projects, and it's like, why? Because again, you could wholeheartedly, I put my as we talk about from a cooking perspective, when they say when someone cooks something good, they put their foot in that, right? So you do this project and you put your foot in that project
Right.
because that's who you are. And then they take that information and it's like, okay, you know what? We're going to go with someone else.
Hmm.
And
But they still using that. They still using those ingredients. Someone actually said that that's working at a known brand that she was doing a program that this brand has for athletes, and actually one of the designer guys came in and they asked him to do a project, and he was like, no, unless I know I have a job. And
and amen. And so that's what I'm saying, right? Like when you do have that passion for something, you also can't be scared to say, you know what, I'm not, because here's the other side of it. If you give that game for free and you come in the door, and the way that you got in the door is you essentially allowed someone to buffalo you when you got in the
hmm
door. Even if you get the job, you have now set the dynamic and the precedent that you will always get buffaloed
hmm
because that's how you got in here.
yeah,
So it's not like, okay, you got in here and you basically over leveraged yourself to get in. And now you're like, okay, once I get in, it's a hard reset. That's not how it works.
right, right.
That's not how it works. It's, my grandmother used to tell me all the time as it relates to dating or things like that, like, you know, the way you start something is the way it is going to finish, right? So if you start over leveraging yourself, or if you start a situation and you essentially snake someone to get a situation, you've just set the precedent for how it's going to be now that you're in the situation.
Right.
So you want to establish it where, yes, you have to value my experience. I came in the door with you valuing my experience. So my experience now that I'm sitting in the seat is I've set the expectation and the precedent that you have to value me while I'm in this seat because that's how I came in here. And
Right.
I can tell you that's probably the biggest thing that I would pay attention to as well. Um, because these opportunities are so scarce. Again, there's this propensity to just, man, I'll do whatever it is I got to do to get in here, and
Right.
and
Similar to players when you want
that's
that
it.
first job. So it's
That's
so
it.
it doesn't change. It doesn't change when playing. It don't change when you go for that job. So in a sense, the lesson of the story is the transition is like learn to handle business while you play. It's a training ground for when you get into the real world.
That's exactly what it is. You just said it much more eloquently than I did, but that's exactly what it is. And if that's the biggest lesson that I always tell, whether it's players that are making a transition, players that are currently playing, or people that want to embark on it, that the precedent that you set coming into the door, you are setting the parameters for the relationship
Hmm.
while you all are working in tandem.
Right. What are some of the things that you made a light bulb go off for you once becoming a scout, working on the business side, the corporate side of the sport game? What, now no longer a player, and now you're immersed in this other world? Because I feel like for me, things just kind of go off like, bro, what? This is how this thing. And it's like I kind of get frustrated because I'm like, man, why didn't I see this? Why couldn't this click for me quicker? But not that is easy, because even when things click and it's a business, as a player it is hard when you start to act like a business, because they
No
don't like
question.
that. So that's also very difficult to do, and that's why I think the best way to offset that is getting more OGs and getting more athletes in these spaces that will accept, as players start to carry themselves as businesses. But I guess, what were some of the light bulbs that went off for you when you shifted to being a recruiter and being in the business side, and you were like, oh, wow, this how they moving? Like, what are some examples of things that you really realize this is a whole business, and the maybe players just don't even see it?
A couple things. The first one is, again, going back to what I was saying, at the essence of what we do this because we love it, right? And when you get into the business world and on the business side of it, how many people do this because this is a business
Mm-hmm.
and you here for the love and they're here for the business? And really understanding that, oh, okay, this is what it is. Like, it took me a long time to do that because I just literally thought, because that's what we get sold. Have great, be passionate about what you do, love what you do, be a good person, and everything will take care of itself. That's a half truth because you are dealing with multimillionaires and billionaires. This is a business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much more of a business now than ever before because those multimillionaires and billionaires that now purchase these teams are purchasing these teams for billions of dollars. So, and they're in it because sports represents one of the safest and quickest returns on investments in all of business. That's why they're in it. It's one of the least volatile things. They can almost guarantee that they're going to get a higher return on investment than any other thing that they're involved in. So this is really a business for them. So you can't be sitting in this seat strictly for the love because it allows yourself to be taken advantage of again.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the other thing that I'll say as well, being open to that lesson is, and that sometimes as athletes, we it's it's the gift and the curse because to get to the levels that we have attained, you have to have an irrational level of confidence,
Yeah.
right? So when you have that irrational level of confidence, guess what you don't have? The ability to be coached because you think you know it all.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what's gotten you to the point. Your self belief in, like, you know what, these people said this, these people said that. Yeah, forget what they're saying. I can achieve what it is that I want to achieve anyway. It got you to that level. But you have to have balance, right? Life is about balance. It's why the Olympics exist, right? The philosophers from Africa, then that information was borrowed in Greece. They all believed in training the mind. The Olympics came because they also wanted to train the body. It's balance. So
Right.
just as much as I believe in myself and have that irrational belief in myself, I also have to know, you know what? I don't know it all. So I got to listen to somebody, whether it's somebody that came before me, somebody that's sitting next to me, when they're talking, that talk and it's real, I got to listen to that and not think that I have all the answers because me believing in myself got me to this point. So that balance and that nuance, and that's what you were talking about when you're saying, man, why didn't I get this earlier? It's because sometimes, not for everybody, but sometimes you are getting those lessons along the way. It's your choice whether you choose to listen or not. And sometimes because we're having that success, because it's all about self-belief, it's all about self-belief, and I'm listening to me and I'm listening to that inner voice, sometimes it's hard to listen to someone outside, whether they had the same journey as you or not. Sometimes it's hard to listen to them when they're telling you some stuff that may be best for you, but maybe you ain't trying to hear it.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely understand that. As a scout, and I think one of the things now, and this with technology, I feel it's kind of getting blurred. There's consultants now that are trainers, but then they getting players signed and then they scouting for teams. And it's kind of
Yep.
like, all right,
Yep.
so as a scout, my first question is, what is the key difference between you and an agent. Technically, we know agents basically are scouting too, getting players and then trying to sell them. What's the key difference between what you do and an agent?
So as it relates to and from a scouting world, a scouting perspective, I'm not selling. The only time I'm selling a particular player to a team is when they call and say, "Hey, we have a need for this. What are the player? What's a player or players do you feel like will fit this particular need, given how we play, who are the teammates that we have, and how the coach coaches, which is an underrated thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because you have to have the right temperament for the type of environment that you're going in from a coaching perspective, and that has to match and that has to marry because that predicts a lot of success for players almost as much as that player's ability. And there are very few players that they're so good that the coaching and those are the transcendent ones where the coaching, the infrastructure, yeah, that doesn't matter.
Right.
Um, so I would say, as it relates to when I'm scouting and I enter into a scouting agreement with a particular team or an organization, whether they ultimately decide on taking my recommendation after they've asked for a set of players or not, I'm going to get paid regardless because they employ me as a scout. So I'm talking to them about multiple players that fit the way that they play and the holes that they may have on their team that they may need to plug.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not pushing a particular player that's aligned with a particular agent. Is hey, you know what? You say you need a point guard that has the ability to move off the ball too, because you have a wing that can also create. So you need a point guard that can also hit shots without putting the ball on the floor. Okay, here are 20 players that fit the bill. Whether you sign those 20 players or not, I'm
Right.
going to get paid by you because I'm a scout for
Right.
you.
And
Uh,
through that process of being the scout, what have you seen now that we're in, again, a lot of technology, everyone's interconnected. Of course, we know there's only certain teams that can afford to get a scout. So most of, when we talking about Europe, most of them are relying on agents. And from the women's perspective of what I know, many of the agents have not played. So,
Absolutely.
that's one of the hardest parts because now you're letting someone that didn't play the game build your team for you, and that's the
Facts.
problem.
Facts. Absolutely.
And a major conflict of interest. So I guess from your time of being the scout, working with the teams, and maybe knowing these players, what have you seen from the agent side that is a little bit outdated from what we know used to have to happen with Babe Ruth, and no one knew, and you had to find talent these days. What's a little outdated now with the agent part of the ecosystem from your perspective, and of course maybe you feel like it's a position in the ecosystem that's much needed, etc. But just what's your thoughts? What have you learned? What's something that hasn't changed when it pertains to the agent role?
um, I think one of the things that I feel like from an agent perspective that we really overvalue today is lots of agents will sign players and push players when we even with all of the information from a statistical standpoint that we have, a lot of agents will just say, give me the players that are playing in college on whatever level they're playing in that scored the most points, and let me get them, and then let me turn around and sell those players to European clubs, and they sold the most points. I mean, scored the most points. And European clubs will also start to value. Let me get these guys over here that scored the most points. And when they value that, that doesn't necessarily mean that. And this is from the men's and the women's side doesn't mean that those players actually are the best players or they have the highest basketball IQs. They're just out there
Hmm.
getting buckets, right? And
Right.
and I feel like scoring even today is so overvalued. And I see agents again pushing players. They just want to get this player signed because they want to get the agent fee. Player goes over there and is a terrible fit for the team, and the agent doesn't care because they just got the agent fee. They got the 10%.
And they gonna get another one because if the player get cut, they got the agent fee and they got the next player to
That's
sell them.
exactly right. That's exactly right. So I think that is it's so antiquated and it still happens. And so really being nuanced enough to find the right fit for your players because and understanding that guess what I'm getting at is and what you're saying is there are so many agents out there that take this as a short-term deal, and when you look at it as a short-term deal, the team and the player both get the short end of the proverbial short end of the stick because the agent is looking at it like it's a short-term deal. As long as I got the agent fee, I'm good. And if I can get it again, I'll get it again. And that aspect of really finding the right fit for the player and making certain that it's the right fit for the player once you get the fee. Because you know this, an agent can place a player, they get over there to their respective team, and the agent doesn't hear from and the player doesn't hear from the agent for the entire season.
Right. The job ain't done. The job is not done, and so that's one of the most difficult things is that's where I think for me I have nothing else I can say because it's like does no one else in the world see it? We talk about it consistently. We all say I haven't heard from my agent. We all
That's
say now that things at the apartment not right, that's supposed to be the agent job, but they saying, "Oh, now I could talk to the manager. Now you
it.
cool if I talk direct to the team, but if
Right.
I was talking to the team directly when you needed to make that connection to the contract, it would have been problems." I think I have no other words but to say that there's a entity in our ecosystem that is not doing a that's doing a disservice not only to the athlete, but I would assume also, like you said, to the team. Maybe if the teams sign better players that have a fit for them the first part, they won't lose money. Players won't lose the tag of being cut when really they weren't cut because they're not good players or whatever. It's because it wasn't the right match. But now, as you know, no one does the research or knows what really happened. So now they just say, oh, it's a player that got cut. I'm not sure. Now that hurts
Absolutely.
that player. And there's so many other things that are negatives due to one deal, one contract, and one person that looks at it as a transaction. And for me, that's where I think more people in the business that are actually stakeholders should be on board to figuring out a new model.
I agree wholeheartedly. Which is why I love so much what you all are doing. So, but it's very much needed because to your point, that's when I went back to what I was saying earlier about for the overwhelming. This is even in NBA for the overwhelming majority of players, the situation meaning what's your support group, and that's the agents included. What's the style of play for the team that you go to? Who's the coach? For the overwhelming majority of players, that is almost as important as how good you are. Because the amount of scouting that we do, there are very few players that don't make it simply because they just weren't good enough. There are very few players that are like that. Because we do so much scouting, most of the players that don't make it or don't get the opportunity because they're just quite frankly the NBA level or whatever level is too high for them. We know that before we even entertain having them on a roster. We already
Mm-hmm.
know that because we've scouted them backwards and forwards and seen them in person so many times, watched them on video so many times The overwhelming majority of players that don't make it, it's not because of their talent. It's really not. It's all of those other things that we're discussing right now. Like, is this the right fit for you? Is this the right coach for you? Is this the right time for you to be on this team? Because if you are a young player, for example, and you're a really, really good young player, and this happens sometimes, you're a young, talented player, and you get drafted to a team that has aspirations to win a championship, their number one priority is to win the championship, not give you reps to develop. So if you go into a situation that and you don't have an organization that has the vision to see this globally and says, you know what, yes, we're trying to win championships, but we have this young talented player that we have to develop as well, and you don't have vets on the team that also value you, you can get lost in the sauce.
Mm-hmm.
And that your journey, your matriculation into the league now negatively impacts your ability to move forward.
Right. I mean, so for the players, I mean, again, when you talk about the NBA, I know you were saying you were doing some stuff also internationally, not only with the NBA. You know, there's European teams that have the budgets, I would assume, that can afford an actual scout.
Yes, yes.
But what what do you think players should be doing? So again, when I think about you, one thing I think about, especially for male players, I don't know. I truthfully don't know many of the, if like, are the W really having scouts on the level that they have for the NBA and stuff. But would it be smart for players to start networking with the scouts, or are they not allowed to? I actually don't know if that's a rule that you can't, build relationships with scouts. But would it be more productive than chasing an agent, and that agent, of course, pigeonholing you to say you only can talk to me, which, because they want to make the money as much as possible off of you. But I would assume a scout shouldn't matter because
Right,
network
right,
with all of us, get to
right, right.
know us. So one, is there a rule, because I don't know, for players that they can't start building like, hey, get to know Antonio, know who he is. If you have the time, you might come across and be able to tell them like, hey, I think you need to work on this. Should players, more so the male side, I'm not familiar truthfully if the women's side is as built out for as an infrastructure of scouts globally in the regard, but from the NBA side, I know even EuroLeague, etc. Do you think guys should be really networking and getting to know who the scouts are?
Yeah, and it's changing because NIL is sort of pushing a lot of this where players have that opportunity from a marketing perspective to be in more professional settings. Like, players
Mm-hmm.
now can sign with agencies for
Yep.
NIL deals and all of those different things. And a lot of it's funny. A lot of the agencies, they will have relationships with some of the scouts. Some of the agents actually represent coaches and scouts.
Mm-hmm.
So you have those opportunities to cross pollinate and really be able to get that insight from scouts. I absolutely, you just said a mouthful. You said that you absolutely should, because here's the other thing. There's a lot of talk about, and I see this from a scouting perspective a lot. There's a lot of talk about players all playing the same way now, because they go to the same trainers and the same trainers train them the same way. And you know this, again, situations matter. Like I said, all players are different. There are some players that have different talents in different areas than other players. So, the best way, if you're really trying to make it as a professional, especially, this goes back to my original statement, if you're going to be a professional, if you're going to be a professional for a long time, people underestimate how good you have to be if scoring is going to be your calling card, if you're going to be a professional and do it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
They underestimate how good you have to be to do that. And we all played in college. We all, when you get to high school, college, you may be the best player. So your calling card might be scoring there. But you need to talk to some scouts so you can project and know what's going to be your calling card if you're going to be a pro and if you're going to do it for a long time, especially if scoring isn't going to be your number one tool to get on the floor.
Right.
So if I'm training you and all these players are getting trained to play the same way, and I'm only training you to be a number one option, and then you get to the professional level and your job is going to be, if you're going to be on the floor and be a cog offensively, you're going to have to learn how to play off of others, and you've never done that in your life. It's going to be a hard one for you, right?
Right.
And on the men's side, to sort of ascertain what I'm saying, oftentimes the player that's the leading scorer in Division One college basketball on the men's side oftentimes does not play in the NBA.
Right. Because you can't fill the role.
Exactly right. Because being the number one or number two, or even the number three option for that matter, is not going to be your role in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
no one's saying that to go and forget about the fact that you can score the basketball. That's not what people are saying. But what people are saying is, what is it that you can do outside of that if that's not going to be your role primarily?
Right. Pat Bev.
Pat
That's
Bev.
Pat Bev. Now he going back to Israel, and they like, oh, people seeing the highlights and like, oh, he can score, and it's like, well, yes, he was always a scorer, but to
Exactly.
stick in the league, he had to adjust. And I do think some players are can adjust. I think for me,
Agreed.
I was a scorer, but then over time to have longevity, okay, some coaches liked how I execute the pick and roll. Some coaches loved how I was able to create off of different situations as a guard. It wasn't just scoring, it was other things too, vocal leadership, or being able to adapt, being able to fill different roles and do things. So I think that is huge, and it's constantly talked about on podcasts. I mean, you hear it all the time. The OGs talk about it, or other players like, hey, you have to fill a role and you're not going to be that best player. But I think it is a testament, like you said, trainers now. That's a whole nother monster of hiring a trainer that going to take the time to know your game and help you elevate and get better in all different areas where you can have success. Because if you are all training to be that scorer,
That
that's tough.
that's tough. You have to be, if you're going to be, you just have to be so good, if that's, and your margin for error has to be, it's just so small,
Hmm.
when if that's the only lens that you can function in at a high level. And so talking with scouts would give you that insight of, hey, I know on your team and I get it, and you should do what the coach is asking you to do in your current setting. But once you come to this level, you might have to, at least initially, get on the floor being a defender and a rebounder if you're big. So, so you have to remain cognizant of that, and maybe you should try and incorporate some of that into your game, in order to really make yourself an attractive option as you move forward. Um, you know, some of the players are that make that transition to the NBA, and then they end up being greater later. They improve. Part of the reason why they're able to do that is because, essentially, for them, they go undervalued because they finally get an opportunity to be on an NBA roster. And once they get on an NBA roster, the transition is easier for them because that NBA team takes them to do essentially what they did in college. Okay,
Right.
my role was a defender in college. The NBA team takes them, they become a defender, they get on the floor, they gain more confidence, and then their offense um, starts to flourish, because now it's, okay, I did what the team brought me here to do first. And it's
Yeah.
an easy transition for them where you see some of these players that they put up big numbers in college. And then once you get on an NBA set, and I used to say this a lot when I scouted in Phoenix, um, one of my first draft pick when I was in Phoenix was Devin Booker. And I say that because I played a role in him ending up in Phoenix. And I say that because Devin earlier on in his career got some DNP CDs, and but he continued to work, he continued to fight, and he's a hooper. Devin's a
Hmm.
hooper, right? And that manifested itself in the Olympics. But from a scoring perspective, when we would bring players in around the draft after his first season, so he finishes his rookie year, Devin had a 70-point game in Boston. And I said to some of the players, look, you know, Eric Bledsoe was on our team. So if you come to our team, what else is it that you can do besides scoring? Because we are a young team building through the draft. So we're not winning a lot of games because we're building through the draft. Very, very young team. But you're not going to be the number one or number. We got a guy on our team that's 19 years old that dropped 70 points in the game. You're not going to be the number one option,
Hmm.
right? We have Eric Bledsoe, who is an all defensive team caliber guy, giving us 19, 20 a game. So you're not going to be the second option. So at best, you're going to be a third option on our team. We just had at that time we had Marquise Chris, who was an all first team all rookie, averaged 10 or 11 points a game, and so you're not going to be the third option. So TJ Warren was another scorer that we had, so you're probably not going to be the fourth option. So what does that mean for you? And so really having those conversations with scouts and really having scouts tell you these are other areas of your game that are very, very attractive that you should look to leverage that will help you get on the floor early, I think is invaluable information.
Got you. I mean, we'll probably sit here all day talking about
Yes.
talking about this stuff. Um, let's get into the deal side. So, player has their agents. Obviously, scouts are around in the ecosystem. Teams are looking to get the best talent. The contract, the deal on the table. We know NBA salaries are public. You can go see them. Pretty much same as W now. But a lot of the rest of the market you can't really see. The salaries, knowing your worth, as you say. What has been your experience with players and watching them sign bad deals? We talked about the transactional agent. So, of course, it's a no brainer that some players sign bad deals because the agent is just looking to make the transaction and move on. Whereas the player needs to be very clear that they need to take a part in what's going on with their business.
No
What
question.
has been, and I'm obviously you have a number experience from a long time in the space, but touch upon some of the key things when it pertains to the contract for the player negotiating that contract, um, and how have you seen it kind of go wrong?
I've seen players sign just horrible deals as it relates to the level of production that the player brings to the table because again they're really looking to just get their foot in the door and they and we all say that we're doing this for the love and we're doing this for the love, but again when you sign, the best thing that you can do when you sign a deal is make certain that you feel good about it. And the reason why I say this is because you know this, being overseas is a very interesting space because people always tell you to be present in the ground that you're standing on.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when you're overseas, you can't necessarily be present You can't necessarily think about the ground that you're standing on. You have to think about the next area where you're going to plant your grass as well. And every time you're playing, every time you're getting tape out there, right? Like you never, ever, 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 ever want to put bad tape out there. Ever. Because as you know, in the way that the deals are structured overseas, if you're putting some bad tape out there, your replacement can be sitting in the stands and you're looking at them while you're playing the game,
Yep.
right? So I say that because if you sign a bad deal and you know it's a bad deal, guess what's the energy that guess the energy that you put into how you're playing in your current position. Oh man, this is a bad deal. I know this is really not a situation. I know I'm better than that. And my rebuttal is yes, you're probably better than this situation. But when you bring that energy, that knowing that you signed a bad deal into the way that you play, now you're putting that bad tape out there.
Right.
And
Nah,
now
it
you're
becomes a
open,
bad situation.
and it's a bad situation, and you know it's a bad situation. And now you're bringing that type of energy out there. I say this all the time to players that the day and the minute that for whatever reason, for whatever whether it's you feel like from a talent perspective you're better or you feel like you signed a bad deal, the day that you start disrespecting the level that you're at will be the day that you'll be at that level for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Because you hear players say that all the time that, I always felt like I was better, but man, this level. So you don't approach it with the same ferocity. You don't approach it with the same vigor. You don't
Right.
approach it with the same attention to detail. And now, and you know this, when you put that to, because again, like you said, a lot of teams in Europe don't have the capacity to hire a scout. And even when they do have, one of the things that I do from a scouting perspective, I also rely on my network to get information about the player outside of between the lines. Not everybody has the ability to say, well, if a team says, well, that player was playing and they didn't play on the game that we watch, they just weren't into it. And, I don't think this is the right player for us. Well, I can leverage my background and you know what, this player they just broke up with their partner or they just had a situation where they lost a family member. So the game that you saw was the game that they were dealing with that day.
Right. Big
Not
looking
everybody
at it,
has,
not a robot. Everybody not NBA 2K like we
there you go.
humans.
Right. Right. But that's, and we know that that's the case, but these teams and these clubs don't approach it with that type of in that type of nuanced manner. They don't approach
Hmm.
it that way. So you don't ever want to put yourself in a situation where you approach the games with that type of energy, whether it's
Right.
justified or not. You just don't want to. So when you go and you know that, man, this wasn't a good deal, or this is a level that's, I probably shouldn't play at this level because it's not challenging enough. You have to approach, if we're using the NBA and the WNBA as the standard, whatever level, whatever contract you sign, you have to approach it as it's the NBA, it's the WNBA and the NBA, because you are really, yes, you got to be present where your feet are. Again, balance. You have to be present where your feet are, but you also have to think about the next situation.
Hmm. Yeah. No, for sure. I think it's definitely tough abroad. Um, Again, lack of information, lack of knowing when you have one agent telling you this is it, this is where you can get, and there's no transparent view of the marketplace. Um, it's difficult, and that's why I think networking, again, for the guys side, more so networking with scouts and really trying to find the vets that came before for is key. Um,
No question.
in the space of transition, for just quickly on the athletes that you talked about, there's a lot of things out there that you didn't know about when you transition. Now, of course, we have LinkedIn. Still kind of hard with LinkedIn to read between the lines because there's a lot of jobs, not only in sport. If you think travel, for me, I really enjoy travel, sport, tourism. There are a lot of jobs out there that You don't really see. What are some of the solutions now you think that are out there for the players to really start to figure out and explore things outside of if they don't want to coach? I think coaching is always the biggest when you're going to coach next.
Right, right,
You
right,
get that
right.
question. But yeah, just touch upon, okay, you've done your thing as a player. You know it's time. You know it's time is coming up. What are some of the things out there, resources to kind of explore these alternative, probably sometimes cool jobs in the sport industry that aren't marketed so much or not mainstream?
I would say certainly there are all sorts of different, and sometimes because of, and I feel like this has happened since 2020, people are it's making the world an even smaller place. You see a lot of on LinkedIn, you see a lot of different, and they're free, different, you see different seminars, different modules, different conferences related to jobs in sports, and you have people that will go on panels and they speak about their respective functions in the industry, and they are free of charge. I would go to those. I would. They're on LinkedIn a lot. Yeah, there are some that you have to pay for. There are also some that are free.
Mm-hmm.
I would attend those. I would register for those. I would also do how we connected because I use LinkedIn like that. Sometimes I have the premium function of LinkedIn, and I get ever so often every month, ever so I get a certain number of free or a certain number of in messages, and I
Mm-hmm.
message people that I'm not connected to, and I ask them about, hey, I'd love to set up some time to talk to you about your job function and your journey and all of those different things. That's something that I would do. If you are interested in scouting, here's where you have to give a little bit of game for free. Again, it's balance. Um, Everybody's passionate about this. Everybody wants to be in the industry. Take a stab at doing the scouting report on a player that is little known that could be a good fit for a team or a player. And so now a team gets some insight on how you think about the game. And it's much more than, hey, I played and I'm passionate about the game. They get those messages all the time. What separates you? What makes you
Right.
different? So I would do some of those things as well. But certainly, I would take advantage of all the free resources that are out there. If you want to invest in something, to me, the the premium version of LinkedIn has been worth it for me because it's helped me build my business. It's been worth it for me.
Got you. Definitely. And I guess takeaways from, we evolve. Of course, the goal is to really figure out how we get more of the vets involved. Of course, we're building a resource, a knowledge base, and again, I'm gonna assume it's hard. Like you said, there's certain things that you could give to the community, then there's certain things that, at the end of the day, someone needs to find you and kind of get in touch with you to be able to gain some of that knowledge.
Right.
I think talk to me a little bit. One of the questions I have is, what would be, or what have you seen, or what should we be doing, or what should I understand? The multi-time thing is, how do we get the vets back home, as I say? Um, I think universities usually, okay, people have alumni associations. Of course, if you won championships, usually they still get together because y'all won championships. Not
Right.
everybody has the luxury of having that alumni
Absolutely.
feel from their university. Pro teams, I don't even know how many. Again, if you won a championship, I'm sure Duncan and the Spurs crew who won get together in their own right, but the number is way larger than who has gone through that Spurs organization, or who's gone through Indiana University, or who's gone through Olympiacos, for example, men and
Right.
women.
Right.
My question is, what is the thing that we, as we evolve, wanting and feeling that the most untapped resource and powerful knowledge base of people are use, and those that are out in the world that have gone through this journey before us? What is the key that you think of trying to figure out how to get that community of people back? Because currently there is no real home to find those people.
Which is actually a great thing for you all because you build it and you are building it, and it's I think one of the big things too is really because there are a lot of us that you spend so much time being in the spotlight, and when it's done you're sort of constantly looking for that replacement, and it
Hmm.
causes you to go underground. It causes you to turn inward because one of the things that we do as athletes is solve problems. One of the things why corporate America loves athletes is because we're able to self-diagnose, solve problems, and do it with without a lot of help because that's how we're wired. So a lot of times athletes turn inward and they don't tell their stories and they hide in plain sight. And because there's this sort of need that's been pushed onto us to separate yourself from your former self. And so I would say really doing what you're doing in terms of contacting athletes and also letting them know this is really that safe space where you are free to tell your stories, because one of the things that we do is we love to tell our stories, and whether it's true or not, yeah, I helped her, I helped him, right? Like we love to do that. So I would say leverage that human need to want to help others, because there are a lot of, now that's not everybody, but most people do
Hmm.
want to help others. But I would certainly say as well, aligning with brands and aligning with entities that love to hire former athletes. I think that's a big strategy for you all. Really being aligned with those brands and entities that love to partner with former athletes, because there are a lot of them, and they'll put it in their job descriptions on LinkedIn. We want former athletes or people that were athletes, and I really think telling those stories, because those entities are tapping into the fact that while all of these there's this again this movement that's telling us to separate from who we are. These companies are saying, "Oh, no, be exactly who you were," because we
Hmm.
want to leverage that. So really being aligned with those brands and those entities, which you all are doing, I think is very important, very important, because you even hear about athletes. I saw a clip of Damian Lillard talking earlier, saying, "Man, it's not like it was when we were playing. Like we used to always be together. You had the OGs helping." This is what he was saying.
Hmm.
So athletes are really seeking these spaces where we don't separate, because it's humanly not possible to separate who we were. Yes, do you have to evolve? Yes. But to just completely, yeah, that's who I was back then. I'm not that person now. It's probably not realistic.
Yeah,
So we're seeking those spaces. So really aligning with those companies and those entities that are doing it, because they're leveraging it. They are out there actively leveraging it and saying, yeah, we want former athletes. So because it's
gotcha.
something that we bring that most people just don't bring.
Got you. What's something that in the sports space you're excited for right now? Like what's a topic or something that's happening that you are proud of or excited for in the sport industry right now?
Athletes really being able to leverage things and causes that are organically part of their DNA,
Mhm.
and being able to, and what we're seeing is, as companies are looking for those same companies that I was just referencing earlier, as they are looking for more opportunities to increase their presence in from a market share standpoint. They're also understanding the importance of, if you're going to charge a premium for a product, consumers are demanding to know that the athletes that you partner with are legitimately interested in the things that you're talking about. This better be real rap now, right? Like this isn't just let's slap
Right,
a
write me a
name and let
check. And
Yes,
I'll put a little smile on and post your
absolutely, absolutely. This better be real rap now.
hmm
And companies are understanding that now, and rightfully so. They should. Consumers are holding them accountable. If you're asking me to pay a premium of this for this particular product, then you better stand for what you're telling me about, and I want you to stand on it. And so, in turn, athletes are now having the opportunity to, whether that's being proud of their heritage, whether that's being proud of their ethnicity, whether that's causes as it relates to whatever the circumstances are. I really love the space that we're in from that perspective, and athletes and companies and entities moving away from, yeah, your expectation here is to, no matter what we stand for, no matter what we think, you're all you do here is just play this sport. And if that's diametrically opposed, if our views and goals are diametrically opposed to how you live your life, then oh well, just deal with it. And that doesn't mean that we don't have, I guess what I'm saying is we now have the arena, no pun intended, where we can have conversations about, well, why do you stand for that? What do you mean by
hmm
that? And that exchange of information and that exchange of ideas, and being able to leverage that and tell those stories to the people that your constituents, your fan base, whatever. I'm very excited about that, and that's trickling all the way down to high school, and I'm very excited about that.
yeah. I mean, everyone talk about making money, but I think what I'm more so excited for, and hopefully the leaders that are again a part of these deals for the athletes are thinking of it like Rich Paul did with the one player I can't recall with New Balance.
So
Um,
he with Darius Baisley, yeah,
yeah, like
yep,
not just the deal, but also, hey, give me the internship, or let me get a meeting with we need to start asking for things that are gonna be reap fruitful returns more than money. And I think
absolutely,
for the micro and nano, now you got nano influencers and micro influencers. Everybody can't get the bag like LeBron,
right,
but we can play a different game. And that's where I think meshing the opportunity to do things and start to actually sit at the table with the brands and ask for ability to network. If you're going to do Adidas deal, then hey, I want free access for this many years to any Adidas event that's around. I want to be able to go. Make sure I can get a ticket.
no
Put
question.
that in the contract, for example. Or, I think those are the types of things that I'm excited that I hope those that are in the rooms with the athlete are starting to think different when it comes to contracts, and understanding everything is negotiable. And I think that's something as in the past, and even still sometimes we don't realize it. Like, I know players say, oh, I didn't know I can ask for that. You are negotiating. You can ask for the moon. They can't give it to
Absolutely.
you, but ask for it.
I
And
scored. No
they
question.
might say, well, actually, we got this connection to Elon. He might be able to,
Get
you
you to
never
the moon,
know.
right?
You
Yeah.
never know what can happen. And I think
Facts.
that's the education I'm excited that we can start putting out there, because I think the first thing is players don't understand a contract is not something that's set in stone. A contract is something you sit down, you negotiate, and then you put everything in it and you sign it, which means beforehand, having information, having that leverage before you sign is where we need to get to. And that information knowledge lives within you, it lives within me, it lives within millions of us and millions of those that came before us. And that's the power that I think we have to find a way to leverage going into this new space. When it was the recession and all that stuff, they love to talk about a transfer of wealth is about to happen. The people that
Right.
have the cash going to be able to really double down. Now I feel like we're in that moment in the sport industry. The transfer of
Hmm.
equity and wealth is happening. And if athletes don't execute this NIL and execute these brand deals, we're gonna falter. And so for me, I look at it as a huge war right now going on, that we can't let this new opportunity, another thing, find us all in the same space we were 10 years ago when we look back. and say, dang, we had an opportunity as a collective and we didn't execute. Um,
No
so
question. You just hit it on the head. And I can say this and add to that what you just said as it relates to that transfer. It's the transfer of wealth, and what you just said also too is the transfer of information. And I will add to that as it relates to being a player, as it relates to people that want to transition and be on the scouting side, if that's something that you want to do, or if you want to be on the branding side as well. Analytics play a huge part of this, whether you like it or not. So, understanding numbers, if you want to work in the NBA or the WNBA, understanding the collective bargaining agreement. And you can resist it all you want. But what ends up happening is you're not, if we don't embrace it, you're now not a part of the decision making collective and you're left in the dust. And yes, you have the knowledge. Yes, you played, but you're also not looking at the other avenues from an information standpoint and leveraging those in order to be, again, you're either at the table or you're on the menu.
yeah,
And whether you're sitting at the table or building your own table, you're either that or you're at the menu or you're on the menu. And that's how I look at it. So having that ability to continue to, and there are so all sorts of resources out there that will help you. No one's saying that you have to understand the collective bargaining agreement like a lawyer, but there are resources out there that break down the collective bargaining agreement in layman's terms, right? And there are also resources out there that help from an analytical standpoint that give you these deep second and third level analytics as it relates to the players, but they do a great job of giving you that in layman's terms. So you better understand that. So if you understand that and you have teams that you're dealing with that make decisions based off of analytics, guess what you can do? Leverage yourself as a player from an analytical standpoint as well, and
hmm
really be, you know what, hey, I know you guys value this. Here's where I measure up in that category. But if you don't understand that, you are cutting off opportunities, and you're also losing the opportunity to increase your value to that team because you don't understand that second and third level data that they're using to make decisions.
right,
And you are the person that they're making a decision on.
right. Yeah, it's just a changing world and
No question.
changing game, and we all just trying to find ways to leverage it. And of course, our passion for this game has led us into spaces, but I think it is, like you said, it's time for us to understand you don't just totally get rid of that, but also being clear on your value.
No
And I think
question.
that's something that everyone around the world in different markets and in segments of work always talk about is value. What is your value? What is your worth? And how do you gauge the reality of that? But Antonio, thank you so much. Like, I know we probably could sit all day talking. I could have went go get a coffee and
Right.
and kept going.
No question.
But I do appreciate it. Every time we talk to you, we go pretty long, and this is my second time actually getting a real sit down call. So I'm hoping more to come. Hopefully in person at some point.
Absolutely.
But yeah, always great. And of course, let the people know, players, anyone that listens to the podcast, where they can find you. Hopefully DM you on Weevolve. We got to get you on there.
Yes.
So if they looking
Yeah, I
for
got
you,
to
we'll
get
be
on
able to tell them, hey, DM Antonio on Weevolve. But if not, what are some other places that they can get in contact if they wanna set some time with you?
So first off, we do have to. I want to work on where people can DM me on Wevolve. I definitely want to do that. So that's for me. I want that sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And then, so also too, of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, Antonio Williams. Send me a message. I respond. That's how we connected.
hmm
Um, I certainly respond to those messages because I understand the grind. Also, too, you can find me at a.williams sports. That's on Instagram. That's also on Uh, that's on Snap. That's also on TikTok as well. So my handles are the same. Nothing creative. A. Williams Sports. I'm not that creative.
Keep it simple. Keep it
But
simple.
yes, yes. And like I said, I respond to all sorts of different messages. If there's scouting questions, if you want me to break down your game, want to do something from a content creation standpoint, I'm available.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you so much. Definitely need to tell people to take you up on that time because you have a wealth of knowledge, and I think for sure for the players trying to get that game film review or even just finding the right trainer, truthfully, that match what you will tell them you see from that game film is the next step. But thank you again.
For
And
sure.
we'll be in touch. We'll keep pinging you in. We'll keep knocking on your door per usual.
For sure. I'm looking forward to it. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
I guess I gotta do it on myself.